The glass doors on the top floor of our corporate office usually felt like a shield against the chaotic world below. I had dedicated 15 years of my life to securing the most lucrative mergers in the history of Vance Holdings. As the lead director of global acquisitions, I did not need to raise my voice to demand respect in this building. My silence was my greatest weapon, and my track record of multi-billion-dollar deals spoke for itself. We were less than 48 hours away from sealing a massive $3 billion merger with Harrison Vance. This deal was my masterpiece. A delicate puzzle of handshake agreements and private clauses that only I understood. I stood by the massive glass windows, reviewing the final terms on my digital tablet. Suddenly, the double doors of the conference room slammed open with a jarring force that shattered the quiet atmosphere. In walked Tiffany, the newly appointed chief of staff and the daughter of our most senior vice president. She was 24, armed with an expensive business degree, and wore an expression of supreme arrogance. It was her first day on the job, yet she carried herself like she owned the entire company. She did not look at the magnificent view, but instead stared directly at my expensive designer blazer with pure disgust. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest and declared that I was violating Section 4 of the company dress code. According to her outdated handbook, my pearl buttons and high-end leather bag did not meet company standards. The entire open floor went completely silent as analysts and assistants stopped typing to watch the disaster unfold. Tiffany stood there with a smug grin, waiting for me to apologize or show some sign of fear. I quietly explained that I was meeting with Harrison Vance in 2 days to finalize our largest acquisition ever. Instead of backing down, Tiffany became furious and shouted that she was my superior by proxy. She screamed that I was insubordinate and demanded that I pack my things and leave the premises immediately. A strange, icy calm washed over me as I realized she had no idea what she was doing. I did not argue or plead for my job because I knew the catastrophic mistake she was making. I calmly walked to my office, packed my personal belongings, and placed my old paper Rolodex into my bag. My assistant Chloe stood in the doorway, pale with shock, asking who would manage the critical appendix clauses of the merger. I smiled gently and told her that Tiffany would surely handle everything with her prestigious education. The security guard, Frank, refused to search my bag out of respect for my long tenure at the firm. Tiffany watched from the elevators, demanding that the security team remove what she called my toxic presence. As the elevator doors began to close, she yelled out to ask about the missing digital files. I simply smiled and told her that some agreements are too valuable to be kept on a computer server. Once outside, I walked to a quiet cafe and turned off my mobile phone to let the silence settle. I spent the afternoon wandering through a quiet art gallery, feeling a strange sense of freedom for the first time in a decade. When I finally switched my phone back on at 6 in the evening, the screen exploded with notifications. There were dozens of missed calls and urgent messages from panicked executives. Chloe had sent multiple texts explaining that the Japanese partners were furious and that Tiffany was locked in her office screaming. The legal team had realized that the entire $3 billion acquisition was falling apart without my personal guidance. They did not understand that the most crucial parts of the contract were verbal promises I made to Harrison. I poured myself a glass of red wine and watched the sun set over the city. An urgent email from Julian, our general counsel, begged me to return to discuss a reinstatement of my contract. He claimed there was a simple misunderstanding and that we should not let emotions get in the way of business. It was amusing how they always blamed emotions when a woman stood her ground, but called it strategy when a man did. I chose to ignore the message and let them sit in their self-inflicted chaos. Later that night, I unlocked a secret drawer in my home desk that contained my most valuable possession. Inside was a worn leather binder containing the original legacy protocols of the Vance Family Trust. Most people believed I was hired for my resume, but the truth was that my father had been the personal attorney for the Vance family. I was the vital bridge of trust between our aggressive corporate firm and their old wealth. I knew that calling the private line of Harrison Vance was the ultimate risk to my corporate career. However, the memory of the arrogant smirk on the face of Tiffany pushed me to make the call. When Harrison answered, his deep voice immediately demanded to know why the parameters of our upcoming meeting had changed. I told him calmly that I had been terminated over a minor dress code violation. Harrison was silent for a long moment before asking who would manage the sensitive Montana land assets. I explained that the new chief of staff believed the basic computer files were sufficient for the transition. Harrison let out a cold laugh, realizing that the corporate algorithm would flag the cherished land of his grandfather for liquidation. He instructed me to meet him for breakfast the next morning and to avoid signing any corporate documents. We met at the Pierre Hotel, a quiet and elegant venue where we could discuss our counter-strategy in peace. Harrison revealed that Tiffany had contacted his office, claiming I was hospitalized due to severe physical exhaustion. He was insulted that the firm thought he was foolish enough to believe such a transparent lie. The firm had violated the key man clause of our contract by failing to disclose my termination immediately. Our corporate chief financial officer sent me a desperate message telling me to name my price to return. But my price was dignity, a currency that the firm had foolishly treated as worthless. Harrison looked at me across the table and suggested a brilliant alternative that would change everything. He proposed that I join his family office directly, bypassing my former employers entirely to manage the acquisition from his side. The next day, Harrison and I walked into the grand boardroom of my former company together. The senior partners looked relieved to see me, but their faces quickly paled when they saw who was walking by my side. Tiffany sat at the table, looking exhausted, her pristine white suit wrinkled from a sleepless night of panic. She tried to greet Harrison, but he raised his hand to silence her immediately. Harrison looked directly at the chief executive officer and announced that the $3 billion merger was officially dead. He explained that Vance Holdings would not do business with an organization that lacked basic integrity and respect. The room fell into a state of absolute shock as the partners realized the magnitude of their loss. Tiffany stared at me with wide, terrified eyes, realizing her brief reign of power had ended. I walked out of that high-rise office for the last time, carrying my head high and feeling entirely vindicated. My former employers lost their largest deal in history, and Tiffany was quietly removed from her position by the weekend. I started my new role with the Vance family, earning double my previous salary while working with people who respected my expertise. This experience taught me that true professional value is not determined by an outdated corporate handbook or a powerful title. It is built on trust, respect, and the quiet relationships that cannot be replaced by a computer system. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply walking away and letting the fire you did not start burn down the entire house.